Hey everyone, good afternoon, good morning to you from wherever it is that you are joining me from. My name is Barton Seaver. I am a chef, author, father, husband, proud resident of the jagged, ragged, delicious coast of Maine, where I am joining you here from today on a very snowy day. We got about, I would say, about 18 inches of snow since about 7 this morning. It's been a lot. So we've got a full house. We got a 5-month-old baby boy in the house with us today. We got a 4-year-old boy. Got my wife. She was at work. So, yeah. Hey, this is modern life. This is life in 2020. And yeah, well, one of the very best parts of that is that, well, we get to spend time together. And there's no better way to spend time together than by cooking and for feeding people. And that is what we are here to do today and to celebrate one of my very favorite meals of the year, but also to answer any of your questions about anything you care to ask, cooking related or not. And I want to hear from you also. What's your favorite Christmas playlist? What are the ingredients that are at the top of your list? What are you hoping for 2021 in your life and in the world? Hey, there's a whole conversation to be had here. We've got just about an hour to go, and so we can fit a lot in. We've got a whole menu option for you, and just to go over a little bit of logistics. Just underneath the window here, the event window, you'll see a document called the event document, and there is the menu for today that we'll be discussing, as well as suggested wine pairings from my dear friend Nadine Brown, who will be joining us via video a little bit later, as well as all of the recipes for the event today. And hey, this is not meant to be intimidating or anything. This is just about teaching good food. This is about sharing fun stuff. And sharing part of this is over in the question queue over there. You'll see the opportunity for you to write in your questions. Also, if you press that little gray heart, you can upvote any other questions. So if they're particularly relevant to you that someone else has asked, please, by all means, dive into that. So, all right. So one thing I like to start off with, anybody that has joined me here in these events before, and wow, it has been one heck of a 2020 of events. This is my last one. Anyway, any of you who've joined me before know that I like to offer something that I am thankful for. And well, you know what? Today, I'm going to say I am thankful for Patrick Britton. He is my colleague and partner and friend behind the scenes on these events and every Ruby event. I think he's done 2,000 or so of them. And still, we have fun reinventing it just minutes before we go live every time. But Patrick, I appreciate you. It is an honor and a pleasure to work with you. So thank you. All right. And with that, let's start drinking, right? Cool. Okay. The first thing on the menu is Pine State mulled wine. And I've got this going over here. And wow, I forgot the most important part of it, actually, which is I can run and go get during when we're talking to Nadine. But I've got my Pine State mug here, the great Pine State, the country of many pointed firs we have here. Anyway, Pine State mulled wine. What do we do here? We do pine very well. We do, excuse me, cat. Thank you. We do maple syrup very well. And we do winters very well. We know how to stay warm. So, Pine State mulled wine. It's a fruity red wine, Malbec, Shiraz, Merlot, something like that, with some juice to it, some jump, a little bit of verve. You don't want a big, heavy tannic wine for this, as the flavors are just going to kind of compete, and that tannin is, well, it's going to get lost, quite honestly, and not add to it and sort of be something you have to overcome in a way with the other seasonings. So, nice, fruity, bold, ebullient wine, if you will. White works perfectly well for this too, but red wine, 'tis the season, 18 inches of snow out there. So sort of typical mulled wine spicing in there. Orange, I put a lemon in there as well, a little bit of ginger, cinnamon. I like bay leaf. Anybody, if you've joined before, knows that I really like me some bay leaf. I buy it by the pound. We can talk about that if you want. We talk about it every week. But the key to this is that I sweeten it with a little bit of maple syrup because, well, that's one of the things we do very well here. I've got two giant old, couple 100-year-old maple trees out in my front yard. I believe that they're that old. And, well, we tap them every year and make a very smoky maple syrup here. So I pour that in there. But the key to this is the pine. So by this point in the season, any of those who celebrate the Christmas tradition will have a Christmas tree likely in their house, which if you have a balsam fir tree, good for you, because it's delicious mulled into wine. Drop like 2 sprigs in just at the very end. You don't need to cook it long. You don't want that resin to come out, but just that wonderful scent of Santa's spirit and just warmth and togetherness that comes out of it. It just blooms, and it brings everything all together in such incredible ways. It also makes a nice little garnish, sort of like a winter rosemary, just call it that. But then the key, I like to add a little bit of scotch, because Maine winters. There you go. And because 2020, and because celebration, and not that booze is an escape. It is something we use to augment things and to celebrate, to maybe mark the passing of with. So you saw I didn't add much in there, just a tiny couple of drops, but a fine scotch, something with some smoke on it, something really peaty, not overly done. Lagavulin is my favorite. This is a gift my wife buys me every year for Christmas, and I am just about out of it, so just about time for another one. Anyway, that with the pine, with the sweetness of the maple syrup, it's not overly sweet, but it's just perfect. The ebullience of the citrus coming through. It is an incredibly mature mulled wine, something worthy of sipping over the course of many hours. So anyway, that is my Pine State mulled wine. Yay! Okay, next thing that we're going to talk about is just what the Feast of the Seven Fishes dinner is, right? Cheers to that. Yes, I nailed that. Okay, that is delicious. Feast of the Seven Fishes dinner, there are a number of various origin legends surrounding this, but it is by and large an Italian-American tradition around the Christmas holiday, some Christmas Eve, others celebrate at other times. Some have 7 fish, some have 5 fish, some have 17. I've seen menus with 23, etc. Basically, it's an Italian tradition of getting together to eat. Imagine that. Imagine that. It just has the focus of the fish in it, the Jesus fish, whatever it is that you care the origin story to be. You know what? Go with it. It's cool. But what I do like about this is it harkens back and honors and celebrates the incredible tradition of cookery and cuisine that Italian immigrants brought to this country and assimilated in. And, one of the reasons why America is so beautiful, because of who we welcome here and who becomes us, right? And so the idea is the 7 fishes, though, break it out by course. It doesn't have to be 7 entrees that you've seen here. These are little bites. And for the feast itself, don't think, here in 2020 when we're not feeding crowds of people, hopefully. Remember? Okay. Social distancing, good practices, sane, safe, sanitized, delicious, right? Okay. Break this up over a couple of days, or just take the recipes that you really like and just do a feast of the 3 fishes or 2.5 fishes if you're whatever. It's just, this is your dinner. You may have fun with it, right? So there. That's sort of the Feast of the 7 Fishes. Very broad overview. And the first fish that I want to talk about, I'm going to broil up some oysters and talk about them raw. My friends over at Love Point Oysters, my neighbors and good friends Cameron and Ben, dropped some off to me yesterday. So we'll talk about that. And then we're going to get down to a video with Nadine Brown talking about wine pairings for this feast and a little just learning about wine. And then we're going to get into the others. I'm not doing a lot of cooking today, but we've got a lot of images that we're going to show you. So first thing with oysters coming up. So Love Point Oysters, please. Well, across the board, please support oyster farmers this season. COVID has been especially tough on them. About 90% plus of business for small scale oyster farmers, which all of them are, was in restaurants. And so that got hit particularly hard. Oysters are not a sustainable seafood. They are, in fact, a restorative seafood. They're a step above sustainable. They don't just maintain, they, in fact, improve. They make better. Plus, they create livelihoods for people on coastlines. And I recently did a piece with National NPR for a program called Living on Earth. And perhaps, Patrick, you might be able to find that if you Google Living on Earth and my name, Barton Seaver. It'll come up. It's about a 15-minute piece, and it describes in great detail all about oysters and why they are so important. Anyway, oysters are also perfect this time of year because they go into, well, hibernation like a lot of other things, and so they have fattened up throughout the growing season and are perfect right now. So, as I said, my friends at Love Point Oysters, because love is the point, right? It's a fun tagline. They brought these over. My son, when we were going to daycare, went to daycare with Ben's daughter. These are grown just probably a half mile from offshore from my house here in Freeport, Maine. So really fun product. You can get these too if you go to efish.com and search out Love Point Oysters. You too can get these delivered straight to your door, and I highly recommend it. And oysters are a food that I recommend eating outright overconsumption of. So if you think you're going to eat a dozen, buy 3 dozen and eat them all and enjoy them, because you are doing a good thing for yourself and for the world. Anyway, so these oysters sat out on my mud porch last night, because everyone in Maine has a little mud room, and they actually froze perfectly. It's not something I typically recommend, but when I went to open them today, they opened incredibly easy because the oysters are basically, they're not dead, but they are shocked a little bit. And so they've the muscles have kind of released the adductor muscle. So here is your oyster, cup side down, top flat shell up. You've got the hinge where we open from, and you've got the mantle or the lip here. In order to open an oyster, you take a pointy metal object, you pick up the rock in which the food comes, you point the metal shank basically at your other hand, and then you push. Sounds perfectly wonderful, right? Safe? Yes. It literally is food that comes inside of a rock that you stick a knife into towards your hand. It's something to get good at. It's almost something to use a towel for. So what I do is come in right through that hinge there. And as soon as you get to the point where you have any leverage, it is not the in motion that opens an oyster. It is the rocking side to side using the tool. If you push up and down like this, you're actually going into the cavity of the shell, and you're just pushing. You're not actually leveraging. So once you get enough purchase in there just to flip open, that's what you do. That hinge can also have a little bit of mud or grit or shell bits in there, so wipe your knife off. Now, the oyster is held together by the adductor muscle, which is about right here. Now, if you've ever seen, a mussel or a scallop, that is what you're eating there, so that's what it looks like. Run the flat side of the knife across the top shell, angled up towards the shell, so you are slicing off. That shell comes right off, and like magic, voila, a perfectly opened oyster should look like the top shell just fell off. That's what it should look like. So then you scoop under the oyster with the other to release the other side of that adductor muscle, and you've got that perfectly shucked piece of meat. Any little shell bits in there, get rid of those, and there you go. So for the Oysters Rockefeller, I am going to turn on my very trusty toaster oven here on the countertop, and I've got a mixture, the recipe for which is in the event document there. This is a little bit of smokiness from smoked paprika and mace, a really wonderful seafood spice. It's the lacy outer hull of nutmeg. It is basically nutmeg with a far more mature, svelte flavor to it, far more savory than nutmeg is sort of a sweet pastry sort of spice. Saute that in butter to bloom those flavors, and lots of butter, because this is Oysters Rockefeller. You know why it's named Rockefeller? What do you associate with Rockefeller? Money, right? I mean, it's synonymous, right? So this is a dish that is as rich as a Rockefeller. That's the whole idea of it. Is it Italian? Nope, it's not. It's New Orleans, that great polyglot city of the world. French, Canadian, French, Acadian, Creole, influences here, but this is America, and we can do this. And hey, while paying homage to the tradition of Feast of the Seven Fishes, you should make it your own, as I'm doing here. So then some blanched herbs go in there. I've got a mixture of cilantro, I think, instead of the parsley that's in the recipe, just because what I had. Parsley, shallots, let's see what else, green onions, and just put a nice big dollop of that on top while you're doing it. The remainder of this mixture is those minced greens, and then some heavy cream, because if the butter's not enough, then heavy cream. But if that's not enough, great, then reduce the heavy cream by half. And if that's not enough, great, then cool it down and whisk in 8 more tablespoons of butter. Did I mention it's as rich as a Rockefeller? Yeah, I did, didn't I? Yes. Okay, I've proven it now. So, nice dollops of that. I'm going to put some then Parmesan cheese on top and a little panko breadcrumbs, and I'm going to throw them right in there under that broiler toaster oven set to high. And in the meantime, while these are cooking, I'm going to ask Patrick to roll this video of my dear and beloved friend Nadine, and I'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Thanks. Hey, Nadine, it's lovely to see you, friend, as always. And hey, thanks for joining us again. I look forward to the conversation we have. Lots to discuss. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's supposed to snow here in DC, but my kids are looking forward to it.
Yeah, they don't get a snow day from school these days, huh? I mean, school is just impervious to that now, I guess. Yeah.
No, I know.
Well, I grew up in the D.C. area, as you know, but yeah, up here in Maine, we're about to get 14 inches or so, and we know what to do with that, as opposed to the snow amateurs of D.C., which, you know, understood. But I remember as a kid, like, we got half an inch, and the federal government was shut down for you know, a couple of days. So I hope you weather it well.
We will. We will.
So one of the things I wanted to start off with is that in the holiday season, one of the things that we do at the end of a year is we reflect back upon the things that have changed us, that we remember, reflect upon anyway. And one of the things I just wanted to say is how much I appreciate you, your Instagram, all that you share, you joining us in these courses, our reconnection as old friends. So you are beloved and appreciated. So thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. Too kind, as always.
Cool. All right. So, Feast of the Seven Fishes. So I shared the menu with you. It's it's protein centric. It's Italian centric in terms of sort of the flavor components, with some other things thrown in. So I'm not sure people are going to open 7 bottles of wine. So if you were to say there's 2 bottles, 2 grapes to go to, what would you say? And what are the sort of the standouts in the menu that you would pair towards specifically?
Yeah, there's, a couple of things really stood out. Oysters. Is it oyster season right now?
Oh, it's always oyster season. Yeah. In fact, this is when they're sort of at a peak. They're full of glycogen and fat, right, and all their winter stores before they sort of go, this is just about when they go into hibernation for the winter. So that, yeah, they are perfect right now.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I feel like every time we talk, I'm back at Champagne. Bellicart Saumon, their Brut Reserve, I think is just a beautiful wine and actually a great value in terms of champagne. Really sticking with wines with a great acid, wines that are interesting. I love how your cooking is really layered. You have a lot of, I was teasing you about the mint, there's some things that are historically hard to pair with wine, but you're always like, it's just a little bit, and that little bit, makes it interesting, and finding wines that are similar, where it's just layered flavors, not just one profile. So I really gear towards wines. This is an Italian American tradition. So definitely wines from the Mediterranean, Greek wines, wines from Sicily. I worked in a all-American wine list for a long time, so I'm a Napa Cab girl. I love wines from all over the world. So I've been going into, getting it more into wines from Sicily and Mount Etna. which are really, really unique. They have a lot of indigenous grapes that are, really only grown there and really showing a renaissance. They have a long history, like a lot of Italy. Yeah, yummy stuff.
Cool. And those wines tend to be pretty affordable too. I mean, that's still, from what I understand, it's really still agriculture, not the culture of wine.
Absolutely,
so much as a a thing of status. Like, it's just still what you do in your backyard there. And that's part of one of the reasons why so many of those indigenous grape varieties sort of endure.
Yeah. Riesling, as a sommelier, I always have to remind, people the majesty of Riesling. There's a producer called Donov, which I love, and they do a Trocken Riesling. It's dry, which will go really well with any of spice that you have. The Escobach, lobster, and Riesling go really, really well together. Those two really stood out. It's a time for Burgundy, Pinot Noir. Salmon and Pinot Noir. I remember going to Oregon wine country and having a salmon bake in the vineyards. If anyone ever gets a chance to do that, it's absolutely gorgeous. But salmon and Pinot Noir and Burgundy work really, really well together.
Yeah, very cool. What I was going to say, I made that squash, the butternut squash and lobster with the aioli and mint. I made that last night. And I used honey nut squash, which are the sort of the new variety, Chef Dan Barber. I'll talk more about them, but they're basically just sort of butternut reduced on the vine. Wow. They're super, super sort of intense in flavor, not any sweeter, but just more intense. Anyway, it matched up so well, and I had splurged a little bit. I had opened up a bottle of Chateau Beaucastel that I had in the cellar that I'm so fortunate to have, and that, oddly enough, I'm a fan of drink what you want, eat what you want, because you do you best always. But that paired remarkably well, and I was very pleased and surprised by that.
Yeah. Being during this quarantine too, I've been having kind of experimenting. I think I assume do a lot of experimenting in your dishes. Sometimes you try things and it doesn't work. And sometimes you put something on paper and you're like, there's no way this is going to work. And then you put it together and like, oh my gosh, it works, So, thinking about wine in that sense as well, and just trial and error and, seeing what sticks.
Awesome. Well, hey, one of those experiments that I did, I was telling you earlier, I just discovered those the Cracker Barrel box of mac and cheese with a squeezy pouch of deliciousness. Right. And I put a can of tuna in there, and then I found some Old Bay hot sauce in the store the other day, discontinued, mind you, because we're in Maine and nobody knows what Old Bay is. Yeah. Hey, that was delicious. Yeah. But you're also right that some of my experimentations just don't work. Anyway. So with that, we're going to ask you. We're going to get down your recommendations on paper. We're going to put that as part of one of the event documents here. And so, Nadine, thank you so very much. It's always a pleasure to have you join us. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I hope that anyone watching here will follow Nadine on Instagram, where she is doing really awesome things and offering great commentary about the world and life and wine and parenting, motherhood, everything. You're such a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good holidays.
Hey now. Welcome back. I love Nadine. She's wonderful. And is she knowledgeable as well? She is an incredible woman, an incredible sommelier, and we are very honored to have her joining us. So, all right, I will talk about the next two dishes here quickly, and then we'll take some questions and we'll keep going on down the list. So next up on the menu is that clams and mussels in Escobach, and then the roasted red peppers, anchovies, and mint. So two fun things here. So clams and mussels in Escobach. This is, a dish that's repeated in many ways, many variations and cuisines all over the world. But generally it is cooked fish or shellfish that is then marinated in a very flavorful, acidic bath. Typically, it has a lot of vegetables in it. It's not just a flavoring bath, but it is rather sort of another major component of the dish. And for mine, well, there's chunks of onion and garlic. There's big chunks of carrot in there that pair well and offer some textural contrast. What else? There's some coriander seeds and black peppercorns, sherry vinegar, big resinous herbs like rosemary and thyme. I mean, you get the picture here. This is a big, fully developed flavor. Orange, big long strips of orange zest, things like that in there. Wow. I mean, what a cool just building of flavors, right? And this is just what I use here in this version. There are Japanese versions of it. There are far simpler versions of just, well, basically olive oil and vinegar, maybe with a little bit of black pepper in it. But that layered built flavor into which the cooked mussels and clams, or just one or the other, if not both, go. And then you chill them down overnight and they pick up so much incredible flavor. And then you serve that with all of that marinade, all of that oil, that lusciousness, that richness on little pieces of toasted baguette, etc. Woo-wee! And the mussel broth and the clam liquor that comes from cooking it is incorporated into it. This is a great dish. It's a good way to use up, a small amount of shellfish. You only need about 1 pound, 2 pounds of mussels, which is quite a lot of actual meats. Clams, the same. So, hey, really fun dish. I learned mine in sort of the Spanish tradition, and that's what that one is there. So, I'm also, oh yeah. So I'm going to do this thing where I hold a pan of something that you can't really see very close to my computer, trying to get you to see it so that all the oil and fat and oyster juices drip onto my keyboard. Yeah, I've done these events before. That's what happens. So I'm actually going to try not to show you everything, but these are gorgeous. These are the Oysters Rockefeller straight out of the oven. I put just a tiny layer of Parmesan cheese on there and then some panko breadcrumbs. You know that these are done when the mantle or the lip, that outside little edge of the oyster, curls up. And you'll see that the fat is bubbling around it. The butter is melted out a little bit. You'll smell it. You don't want to burn the cheese, but you do want some dark. You want some color on that. You have the freshness of the herbs, the richness of that, the salinity, the brine, that sort of funk of the oyster in there as well. Don't eat these straight out of the oven. Don't. It hurts. It hurts a lot. Why? Because it's an oyster in fat sauce with taste in it. It's wonderful, but it's going to be very, very hot. The advantage of that is that, well, you can cook these over a long period of time. I'm just doing little batches of 6, 8, whatever fits onto a sheet tray in a little sizzle pan in my oven here. You can prep them all the day before and just put them covered in your fridge or something like that. Just take them out as you need them and throw them in there. They'll stay warm for a good bit of time. So this is a perfect little appetizer course to eat. Same thing with those clams and mussels and escobach. It's sat out on the counter at room temperature, served either in the shells or on baguette, etc. Very informal meal. Great way to start. So there's the Oysters Rockefeller and the clams escobach. Let's move on to one of my very favorite seafoods, the anchovy. This is a dish that you might have seen me do here before, one of these episodes, but this is a dish that I learned, flavor components that I learned when I was a fisherman over in Morocco. I worked off the coast of Essaouira, the arts capital, the famous White City down on the Atlantic coast, the gorgeous, gorgeous place in the world, fishing sardines and anchovies over there. And the flavors of roasted red peppers cooked over fire, they get nice and smoky. Mint, which is, well, quintessential in so much of Moroccan and Northern African cuisine and beverages, is just a really interesting flavor to pair with seafood. And then back to that friend mace again, just a little sprinkling of that over the top. Now, this might sound very exotic in flavor to you, but in fact, you're familiar with all of these flavors, and you'd be astounded at how well they integrate. And you can roast your own peppers, which I recommend doing. I do it in an oven. I never do it on the stovetop, over gas. I just think it tastes like I don't think it tastes good. I'm not a big fan of gas grills. I think it just, yeah, it takes on a biological whiff, if you will. That was a nice way to put it. I cook them under the broiler. I don't do necessarily the bag technique, but just cook them until they are black. You do want to burn the skin and then just let them sit in a bowl, steam up, and then pull that off. And I also don't worry too much about getting all the skin off, because if there's little bits of brown, bitter awesomeness to pair with the sweet pepper, okay, that's cool. But you do want to remove the stems, the seeds, and then just cut them into strips that are easily eaten off of a platter. I like to serve this as a platter rather than as an appetizer, sort of formal course. And again, with baguettes. So here we are. There are 4 fishes now out of the way: anchovies, oysters, clams, and mussels, and a nice mug of mulled wine down the hatch. And we are 4 of 7 fishes in to our feast. Cool, right? Yeah, it's fun. Oh, and canned roasted red peppers? Yeah, go for it. If that's easy, do it, because they're tasty. Look for piquillo peppers if you can. It's a small Spanish sweet pepper that's particularly good for this. But otherwise, yeah, make this easy. And buy good anchovies, though. That's another key. Anchovies are an ingredient that have earned a bad reputation because, well, there's some anchovies out there that are just not meant to be an ingredient on their own. They're meant to be vinaigrettes or sauces or simmered down in tomato stews, etc., right? The bad anchovies on the bad pizza that you had at the mall in the 1980s, right? When that was the thing. That probably isn't the anchovy that I'm recommending for you here today. Go look for a known brand like a Roland brand. These are a smoked anchovy that I really like, available at online retailers, Italian specialty stores often. If they come in a glass jar, that's a very good thing, typically indicative of quality. But yeah, there's a lot of different anchovies out there, but go with a brand that you recommend or that you know, and other products that you like. Okay, let's take some questions. We're about half an hour in here, and I'd love to get to that. A nice, good crowd joined today. So first question, and I'll take a couple, and then we'll get back to the last 3 dishes on the menu or so. From Mary Jo. Hi, friend. Nice to have you back again. Mentioned slow roasting salmon in a previous event. How do you prepare it, and do you cover it during cooking? And then you've got another one for green curry, fish curry. So the slow roasted salmon, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a whole roasted salmon, as we'll talk about later on in this event, no, I don't cover fish when you're roasting them. Because the slow roasting nature of it, you are already preserving so much of that moisture. You're already sort of treating the fish, the fillet, so gently that you're not forcing through sort of the violent process of high heat cooking. You're not forcing that moisture out. So to cover it, basically at this low of a temperature would just cause it to steam and not really roast. And you do want some of that evaporation, I think, just for flavor. So depending on the slowness of what you're looking to do, anywhere from 250 to 300, maybe just a hair over. But let it take its time. Salmon, it is a very, very resilient fish on low heat. It might take 25 minutes for a nice big thick fillet. It might take 20 minutes. I even cook them from frozen often, and it'll take 45, 50 minutes. And I'm okay with that because I get to talk with my wife about what's happening in our world. I get to build magnetiles with my kid. I get to read an article in the New York Times, whatever it is. I mean, cooking doesn't have to be fast and convenient all the time. It can be really slow and convenient too. And that also buys you that time to cook some brown rice and some broccoli and whatever else you're eating for dinner that night. So that low, slow roast, the salmon is done when you can flake it with your fingers easily. Now, slow roasted salmon, depending on the species, depending on the farm where it came from, etc., it might look kind of raw, even when fully cooked, when slow roasted. So here's the trick. Salmon, when it's cooked, flakes. Raw salmon does not flake. So if you can push it together with moderate pressure and it bursts open into those beautiful convex flakes, it is done, regardless of the color. Okay? So there you go. All right, and then your other question, good fish curry. Yeah, I've got a couple of great fish curries that I really like. I'm going to take this opportunity to say, hey, are you looking for a last-minute Christmas gift for your friends, family, or self? Meet The Joy of Seafood. This is my latest book. About 900 recipes for about 100 different kinds of seafood, and most of it can be done just on a Tuesday night with what you've got in your pantry. This is not necessarily fancy pants cooking. Some of it's interesting and different and new, but by and large, it's meant to kind of meet you where you are. I've got a couple of recipes for good curries in there. I like a Southeast Asian style curry, a green curry, where you saute down your aromatic vegetables in oil. You're talking ginger, garlic, onion, scallion, etc., lemongrass, lime leaf, and then you add in cilantro, and then puree it with coconut milk. And then there is your base of your green curry. I usually cook add in some potatoes and salmon or something to cook it down and just slow simmer. You don't want to have it over a high heat because it'll break that coconut milk. It'll curdle it a little bit. A way to avoid that would be to put in a tablespoon of cream or half and half, which helps to stabilize it if you happen to have that around. But otherwise, seafood takes to curry flavor very well. And just a really good fresh curry powder. And I say fresh because a lot of people I know have curry powder from the 1980s in their cupboard. Don't use it. Just don't use it. It's not good anymore, right? Go get a nice, fresh, small vial of curry powder. Lightly dust a piece of cod or something like that, a white fish with a little bit of flavor to it. And then just moderate heat, a little bit of butter, and roll the cod in that to toast those spices. Throw it in the toaster oven at 300 degrees. Let it cook until it flakes. And you've got a wonderful curry scented cod. So, Mary Jo, there's a couple of ideas for you. I do hope you are well. And thanks for the kind comments on the learning events. Awesome. Okay, from Judith. Hello again, friend. Nice, lovely to see you as always. Do you have a favorite New Year's Day chowder recipe? I love how you're always asking for favorite recipes. I think you asked for a lobster recipe last time. New Year's Day chowder recipe. I'm a black eyed pea fan, which is not a chowder, but that's kind of the style I go in. But for chowder, winter chowders, smoked haddock, smoked cod, something like that is great. The salt cod, something with a little bit of flavor, that developed flavor. You can leave out the bacon in it. Buy good milk. Okay, buy good milk. Buy good quality cream. Go to the farmer's market. Go to the specialty grocer or high-end grocer and pay for the good stuff, right? Because what is a chowder? A milk-based chowder. It is a milk soup flavored with some other things, right? So buy good milk. If I was going to make a chicken soup, wouldn't you want to start with a good chicken stock, right? Like you wouldn't start with crappy stock. So don't start with just whatever milk. It's the principal ingredient in the chowder. The other two ingredients that you really need to pay attention to are potatoes. Buy good potatoes, not just whatever you have sitting around. Go find some farmer's market delicious ones. Find a mixture of them. Get some red skin potatoes. Get some Yukon Golds. Get some creamer potatoes so you end up with different textures, different colors in there, and it otherwise just kind of, it's a white soup chowder, right? Hey, you haven't reinvented the chowder. You've just used different kind of potatoes. You haven't reinvented the flavor. You've just given it depth and maturity, and you've evolved it a little bit in some really interesting ways, right? And good potatoes are really tasty. So, and then smoked haddock. I just love it, fin and hattie, something like that, or even a small amount of smoked mackerel mixed with cod or other white fish, tilapia, I mean, you name it. I really dig that. And you know what? Make it a couple of days before New Year's, because chowders, like marriages, like all relationships, like your stock portfolio, they're better when you wait on them. Like, it's just like things get better with a little bit of time, right? And chowder is probably top of that list. A chowder today is great. A chowder tomorrow is revelatory. Give it a couple of days to sit in your fridge. Make a big pot of it. Celebrate it over a couple of days. And there you go, Judith. All right. And again, well, I'm going to take this opportunity. There's lots of chowders, smoked fish chowders in the Joy of Seafood there. So, all right. Hi, Sharon. Nice to see you again. doing your seafood literacy course and want to grind herbs in a mortar and pestle. Well, I thank you for doing the seafood literacy course. I really appreciate having you in there. What's the best type of mortar and pestle to get? Thanks for the great course and happy holidays. Well, happy holidays to you too, friends. So, Sharon, I'm going to say that I actually am not much of an expert on mortars and pestles. However, I did actually buy myself for a Christmas present a couple of different textures and grinds on a mortar and pestle. The one that I have been using for, well, a long time, and I find to be good for herbs and for aioli, which is what I make in it, is a smooth porcelain or marble with a smooth grinder, pestle or mortar, excuse me. That's the sound it makes, if that helps at all. But I do like that smoothness to it. I don't like to really, really mash herbs together, against so much friction and structure, like a molcajete, which is the what's used in Mexico. It's like a volcanic rock that's used for making guacamole and mole sauces and other things, where you're grinding down pepitas, pumpkin seeds, spices, hard spices like coriander, things like that, cumin seed. That you want a little more structure and texture on, so you have a little more grate to it. With this, you want that smooth, slow action of the crushing against the herbs, more so than the ripping, tearing, gnashing, mashing. So there you go. I got this one. I think this was $13. So nothing exorbitant there. Awesome. Hey, thanks. Appreciate you. Okay. Hey, Terry, this Italian will be all yours for this event. Well, I hope that we are delivering for you. I know that we are not full-on Italian, but we do hope I am honoring your heritage with this. And hey, thanks for all that you bring to American cuisine. A great tradition of cooking. So, and I hope you get some great ideas. And you know what, Terry? Hey, why don't you share with us what is your favorite Italian or Italian-inspired seafood dish? Curious to hear from this all ears Italian. Hey, awesome. Thank you. I look forward to that. Now let's jump into the next couple of recipes, all right? And then we'll finish out with some questions. So the next one up is a butternut squash soup. I will be right back. All right. Had to go out to the root cellar there. So, butternut squash soup. I like to just let it taste like squash, right? If you go to the effort of buying good squash, or as I do, growing good squash and really paying attention to it, then you don't need a whole lot of other things in there, right? You can just kind of let it be. Let's see. I am getting down to that recipe, so I'm not lying to you here. So you'll see in the recipe that I use, it's a base of onion to add a little bit of just that mirepoix essence and elegance to it. A good amount of olive oil to add some richness to it. Butternut squash, and then that's it. Water, then salt. Yeah, that's all you need. If you have really good squash, you don't need chicken stock, you don't need veg stock. Certainly that adds to it. It can also diminish it, or not diminish it, but dilute it, if you will. So the squash that I really like to use, this is a kabocha varietal 898. I grow this. I go to row7seeds.com. My friend Dan Barber, the great chef at Stone Barns, he bred these along with a great plant breeder out of Cornell University. He bred them for flavor instead of farmers just growing what farmers can grow well and then hoping chefs want it. Chef Dan Barber was like, "Hey, can you grow me a squash that tastes like this and has these, has these characteristics?" Hey, designer chef squashes, right? I mean, hey, they're not genetically modified. This is just classic breeding techniques. We do it all the time with everything we grow. So anyway, I really like this one. It's got a really meatiness to it, a depth of flavor. It doesn't have that cardboard, like paper-like kind of pulpy quality of flavor that some squashes can have, but it's also not overly sweet. The sweetness is mature. And the way that I kind of describe that is like think about eating a spoonful of white sugar. I mean, it might excite some physiological thing in you, but it's not an exciting bite of food, right? I mean, it's just, there's nothing to it, right? That's kind of gross, actually. And then think about a spoonful of honey. Well, that might be too much. I mean, it's so highly flavored. And then think about a spoonful of maple syrup, and you're just like, oh, yeah, maple syrup. I can eat that all day by itself because it's so delicious. I love it. That's kind of what this squash is. It is the elegance of maple syrup as to the sugar load. As for butternuts, I use these tiny little ones. These are new to market called honey nut squash, which is basically a butternut squash. It has all the flavor of a big butternut squash. It's just kind of reduced down into this little package. So you don't have to do that reduction work yourself of just cooking out all the water of a butternut squash. Super dense flesh, dense flavor. It doesn't have any greater sweetness than regular butternut squash does, but it has greater flavor to it. And I use these. And how cute is this one, right? I mean, this is my finger, and that is a butternut squash. That's the whole butternut squash, right? They're also convenient because, well, they're individual serving size. And when you're making soup, 2 pounds of peeled butternut squash, that's what you need, right? But for a lot of other uses for butternut squash, you buy one and it's like, okay, so I needed a half cup of it for this, whatever I was making. What else? What do you do with the other 3 pounds? These are kind of cool, and the flavor is really great. I've also got these Trombonchino Squash that I really like that I grow here. These are great because they are good zucchini type squash. They're really, really tasty zucchini. And then if you leave them on the vine, they grow into hardened winter squash as well. They do have a pulpiness to them, a somewhat granularity to them. You have to cook them a whole lot, but once you do, do they hold air, and they get so silky in a puree. So the seafood in this, Dungeness crab, a nod to the incredible crab of the West Coast. The season of that started right about now. It's just absolutely delicious. Just very simple garnish with that. A little bit of herbs, a little bit of orange zest, and shallot to add a little bit of texture to it. And there you go. So we are now 5 species or 5 fish into our Feast of the 7 Fish meal. And guess what? Most of the prep, you did it all yesterday. I mean, this is all food that's been kind of served at room temperature, sitting on the counter. The soup you made yesterday, reheated, the crab. This is low stress, folks. Hey, if we don't make this part of your Thanksgiving tradition, a harvest feast tradition, whatever it is, go for it. Anyway, so the next one up, and I forget now, the lobster tossed with aioli. So staying with the butternut squash theme, I made this just the other night. Originally, I made this dish with zucchini as a summer preparation, but I made it just the other night, getting back to that flavor of mint again. So it's got pan roasted butternut squash flavored with a little bit of ginger, some garlic, tossed in just after it's been roasted, cooked for about 2 minutes just to aromatize it. You got these nice sort of crispy edges to it. Let it cool down a little bit. Toss the whole thing in a homemade garlic aioli, and then some mint, and then just some lobster meat strewn over the top. You have this warm or room temperature dish, which is just invigorating and incredibly fun and interesting, and is a different way to eat lobster. It's elegant, but it's approachable at the same time. All the work is done on the lobster. The meat is shelled and shucked ahead of time. And you know what? Here's the thing. Most people think of lobster as a summer treat, but right now the season is still going incredibly strong, and lobster is a really great product coming into these winter months. So, yeah, there you go with that. There's also really great frozen lobster meat that's already cooked. Also raw shelled lobster meat now called cold cracked or high pressure processed, which is absolutely delicious. Just poach that in a little bit of white wine, water, some orange zest, something like that. You've got a delicious, delicious meal. All right, and then the last thing on the menu here is the whole roasted salmon. So this is really other than cooking the butternut squash, sort of day of. This is the only thing that's really day of. And yes, this is a whole lot of food, folks, right? Yeah, it is. It's a protein feast too. Eat your vegetables the next couple of days to make up for it, certainly. But a whole roasted salmon is really such an elegant thing to do. We did a whole class, one of these webinar events on whole roasting fish. Please go back and check that out for more. But this one's really fun. And what you don't eat today, it makes wonderful salmon cakes, makes salmon salads, etc. You can make the salmon cakes, freeze them, pull them out as a convenience food when you get into the doldrums of January, once all the lights are down. And, well, you just need something fast and convenient. So amongst the many ways to do it, I've got the fennel stalks, some like Thanksgiving herbs like sage, thyme, rosemary, kind of these fun roasting spices. Shove that into the cavities of the fish, into the slashes made along the side of it. Put some lemon slices on top or orange slices and roast it pretty slow. What do I have in there? About 350. And for a whole fish that's 4 to 6 pound fish, that's going to take 40 minutes or so or more. But the way to tell if it's done, put a toothpick into the center of it, hold it there for a second, pull it out, put it on the bottom of your lip. If it's hot, well, then the inside of the salmon is hot too, right? So that is very much a pre-COVID or a, in your own bubble method of testing doneness on things. The other way to do it is use the thermometer. I'm looking for about 125, right, 120, 125 right along the bone. Or you can just put a tip of a knife and a paring knife in there, wiggle it around, and just kind of open it up. If you see that the flesh is evenly colored throughout, it is done. All right, so those are all of our recipes that I wanted to talk through. And so let's dive back into the questions. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you. Any good tips for steaming fish in banana leaves, Raina? Ooh, that's a good one. Steaming in banana leaves adds some flavor, but it also really is about structural integrity. The steaming in the banana leaf was, I believe, or in grape leaves, or in, any leaf sort of tradition is really about the structural integrity, cooking it over an open fire, grilling it, etc., steaming when we didn't have sort of custom-made things to steam it in. It does add flavor. However, what I would beg you to do is to pre-season your fish for a little bit ahead of time, whether it's with lemon zest and salt. Certainly with salt, let it sit for about 20 minutes. Let the seasoning penetrate through the flesh. And season it with something that you wouldn't mind eating raw, meaning not with coriander, ground coriander. Ground coriander needs to be toasted for the flavor to be good. It gets a little granular, right? Because inside this leaf, it's just going to steam. It's not going to toast. It's not going to cook. It's not going to mature so much. Things like lemon zest, great. Things like salt, maybe a little bit of pepper, great. Things like basil leaves wrapped around there, great. Absolutely. Flavors that you think will taste good raw or over very low heat are good. So that's what I would recommend for steaming. In terms of technique, they make little bamboo baskets that are very easy to use in multiple sizes so that you can find one that fits right in the pan that you've already got. I recommend those. They're, I think, about 10, 12, 14 bucks or so. If you're going to invest in the banana leaves, the frozen packages, those cost $5, $6, $7 a piece right there. So, invest in the bamboo steamer as well. But in addition to banana leaves, try grape leaves. The vinegar brined ones. They add a whole lot of flavor and are delicious in their own. Awesome. Well, hello, Hilda P., our friend from Our Humble Kitchen. Always look forward to your events with Zest. Oh, thank you. I appreciate you. Merry Christmas to you as well. It's going to be a wonderful one. We have been so blessed and fortunate. We are overdoing it a little bit for our 4-year-old, underdoing it between my wife and I so that we can really give him a lot of joy. And we are also supporting and serving our neighbors. We have been so fortunate to get through this year, not just intact, but I would say even thriving. Yeah, it is our responsibility. Here I am talking to you about a feast of the 7 fishes and what could be absolutely deemed as gluttony in a time when people are hungry and are scared and anxious. So as we do eat, I do not say this to bring a pall of guilt over it, over any celebration whatsoever, but rather celebrations are best when we are inclusive of all. And so we are spending our time this holiday season remembering others, serving others. And I'll tell you, if stimulus checks come through, they are going directly into community supporting organizations. And any of you who are out there in America who might be getting a stimulus check, I would ask you to do the same thing if you do not yourself need it. So, okay, enough of that. That was an unfish. But we are all humans. We gather around the table because food is love and love each other. From Catherine, hello, friend. Nice to see you. Glad to be here. Can you talk about different fish that produce caviar and how caviar tastes? How would you use different types? Wow, Catherine, that is a big question. Probably worthy of an entire webinar, in fact. I wonder if anyone else would have any interest in that. If anyone here does, click that heart next to Catherine's question. We might do that. So I won't have time to answer that question fully. I will give it a shot here, though. Basically, there are the traditional forms of caviar, which are coming from sturgeon, various species of sturgeon, Osetra, Beluga, and Sevruga, which are all different fish. The salting method is a means to cure and to preserve. Originally done as a means to preserve, caviar was a food of the commons, as well as became a food of the imperial courts as well, but it was really a means to preserve a delicacy, but also just a really good food source in the winter. That salt ratio is very specific. And the art of eating caviar is very specific from what spoon you eat it on. I will tell you, I actually prefer my fingers, washed, of course, prior. But nowadays, we are seeing caviar coming from a whole lot of different sources, which I find a very good thing. A, because a lot of those sturgeon that traditionally make the caviar, sturgeon caviar is not. There's an old joke that the chicken and the pig are both at breakfast. The chicken contributes, the pig participates. The same is true of the pig as is the sturgeon. The sturgeon must be killed in order for the eggs to be harvested. So traditionally, they are highly endangered at this point. And now we are using paddlefish. We are using bowfin. We are using a number of different species, also different species of sturgeon themselves, that are all producing really impressive quality. You know, are they Osetra? No. But is Pinot Noir Cabernet? No. That doesn't make Pinot Noir bad wine, right? We're beginning to see this diversity coming through. But then you also have sort of black or pearled roe caviars, which you have like Ikura or the salmon caviar. You've got trout caviar. You've got capelin roe, masago, all these different things, all have different uses. But all of them add salt. All of them add rich umami flavor. All of them should be delicious eaten on their own. But all of them also act as a really good companion ingredient, a little bit going a long way. So, big answer, short time. There you go, Catherine. I'd love to talk more about that with you, perhaps in a whole webinar event. So reach out if there are any specific questions that you have. Barton@ruby.com is my new email address. So reach out to me there if I can do anything for you. Cheers. From Ahmad, beef is cooked by temperature desired doneness. Chicken is cooked to 165. Can I cook fish by temperature as well? Great question, Ahmad. Yes, absolutely. You can cook fish by temperature or to desired doneness, which you don't have that universal degree of doneness as you do with chicken, because pink salmon at 135 degrees is going to eat a lot differently than king salmon cooked to 135 degrees, which is going to eat very differently than cod or tilapia cooked to 135 degrees. It all depends on the amount of protein in there, the water content, and the fat content. And seafood has an incredible range of that. Species like tuna are not, to my palate, when fully cooked, like to 135. I like them a little bit cool on the inside. That's why you see the seared rare tuna dishes constantly. The sashimi dishes. So I can't offer you a universal temperature cook to this, but I would recommend that. It sounds like you're very interested in cuisine and testing things out and trying them. So if you have opportunity to, next time you have a piece of salmon for dinner, cut it in half. Cook one to 120 degrees and cook the other half to 125. Or cook one to 120 or 115 and 130, etc. And just try them side by side. Use a thermometer to do this. And it's that comparative tasting in the same conditions, meaning you're cooking in the same oven, same temperature, just different times. That will begin to give you a sense of the time frames and the doneness that you're looking for species by species. Cool? Ahmad, hey, I appreciate you. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, Star. Could you do one dish with all 7 different seafood items in it? Yeah, sure. It's called pasta or bouillabaisse. How did this type of tradition come out? Is there something significant about the number 7? You know what, Star? I am just going to admit that I do know this. It is somewhere in my head. And Star, I cannot recall it right now because I have spent the last week with my 4-year-old, and I am at his level right now for the most part. I will say, though, that all of that is in American Seafood, the other book that makes a great gift. This is a narrative history of all of the seafoods caught in America, over 500 different species. And a lot of those rich traditions of food and culinary are written into that. But 7 is an important number for a number of different biblical reasons. You know what, Star? And I'm just embarrassed because they're escaping me right now. I slept 2 hours last night. It's just where I am. I'm going to have a sip of wine and just drown in my ego there. Sorry. Can I do all 7 fish in one dish? Yeah. I might, yeah. So, all right, here we go. We're going to do a tomato-based bouillabaisse. I'm going to saute onions, garlic, a little bit of ginger, and the anchovies into, all finely diced and cook that into a mash in olive oil. And then I'm going to add some white wine, some fennel seeds, and the liquor from cooking the mussels and the clams. So they're pre-cooked and they're shucked out of the shells. The meat's reserved and all of that liquor. I'm going to add that with the white wine. Simmer that down until the scent of wine is gone. Add in 1 28-ounce can of fire-roasted tomatoes or San Marzano-style tomatoes. Then, let's see, where do you go from here? Simmer that for about 10 minutes. Add some fennel seeds in there, some salt. Simmer it down for about 10 minutes covered to get that rawness out of the tomatoes. Then I'm going to layer in the salmon and simmer it very, very low and slow. This is salmon fillets, skinless, boneless. Very very low and slow. I will then remove the salmon fillets. I will add in the oysters, the mussels, the clams, the crab. I think that's all of them, right? Yep. And about 1 pound of diced fresh tomatoes. And I'll simmer that all together. These are raw shucked oysters with their liquor, raw diced tomatoes, and just fresh tomatoes. Simmer that for about 5 to 7 minutes for the oysters to cook through, the fresh tomatoes to just kind of give their vibrancy and acidity into the sauce, get it all pretty married together. And then slip those salmon fillets back in there, put the top on it, let it cool down for about an hour or so. Reheat it gently if you think it needs so. And there you have this incredible bouillabaisse 7 fishes dish that I just pulled on the top of my head. There you go. That was fun. All right, Sterling. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, one of my very favorite cities. It's usually warm on Xmas. Yes, it is. You're lucky for that. We've got probably 20 inches of snow right now. All today, we'd like to use our big propane grill plus burner to make the most of our meals so we can sit outside. Oysters, squid, tuna, shrimp, king mackerel, etc. Awesome. That's really great. King mackerel, too, that time of year. Whew, man, so good this time of year. Oysters, I hope you do them South Carolina style. You do like the whole oyster roast, the whole sharpers. You put them all on there. Man, South Carolina cooking. Very little better than that, I'll tell you. Of all the Southern traditions, that's a great one. Hey, thanks, Sterling. I appreciate you sharing that with us. King mackerel, great flavor. All right, from Adele, could whole snapper be substituted for the whole salmon in your recipe? Thanks for the event. No, Adele, you are so very welcome for the event. Yes, absolutely. Whole snapper can very easily be substituted in. The cooking time is going to be dropped significantly depending on the size of the snapper. I would recommend, though, however, a 2 to 3 pound snapper, 4 pounds. Your overall yield is going to be less, just a smaller fish, but the head is going to be left on that too. Great preparation, but yeah, the sage, the rosemary, the thyme, the parsley, the fennel, the lemon, all of that is going to pair beautifully with that snapper. Make sure it is scaled first, and make those shallow incisions across the skin. Season it and let it sit for a little bit while longer before you cook it. Give it like half an hour to an hour or so. Snapper benefits from sort of a dry brine. Get the salt in there, into the cavity, pierce it a little bit. Let that salt do its work. Cheers, friend. Thanks. Chris E., hello. Hi, dear friend. Wow, all the greatest hits of our Ruby friends here are here today. This is awesome. Recipes often indicate broil without stipulating whether it's high or low. I have tips on when to broil on low and when to broil on high. Yes, okay. Chris, great question. So the other part of this is how far away from the fire you are. Now, in my broiler, and Chris, I believe that you have the same broiler as per previous conversations, you have 2 heat units on top. And so you have a space between those heat units also. So you're going to have these sort of downspouts of heat, right? You're going to have hot spots in your broiler. So be aware of that, first of all. The second of all is how far away you are from the broil unit. The closer you are, the more broily the broil is, right? The farther away, the more you're basically just kind of an oven if you get too far away. So if you are trying to do something like an oyster where you are, I guess, Chris, the thing to consider then is, what is your desired outcome? Okay. Always cook to the outcome rather than the other way around and just kind of cook and hope it turns out, right? Have in mind that when you broil your Oyster Rockefeller, what you are looking for is that crisp. I mean, you can hear that, right? It's slightly crisp. The Parmesan is browned. The breadcrumbs have toasted. That's what you're looking for. Okay. You also have a small amount of meat, right? So you don't want to overcook the meat, but you want to broil it quickly. So this is high heat, close to the heat source. If you need to back it off, great, because the oyster, that mantle isn't quite cooked yet. It hasn't curled up. Great, drop it down or turn it to low. So if you're looking for crisp, if you're looking for color, if you're looking for that real shift in flavor, that caramelization, you're going high and you're going close. If you're looking for control and ease of cooking, meaning I just want to know where my heat is coming from, I want to know how much I'm applying, and I just want to I know that it's in the oven, and like broiling is actually a highly controllable way to cook. Broiling a salmon fillet, for instance, and you put, and Chris, as you I think have that stalk pan. So here's a different one, but you've got a cast steel pan, a cast iron pan. You get it rip-roaring hot. You put your piece of salmon in there. You're going to have contact heat coming up from the residual heat of this. If you put the whole thing under the broiler, under low, a little bit for 5 inches away from the heat source, okay, now you've got pretty even cooking coming from the pan and coming from the top. So if you think about it that way, it's sort of, what environment am I trying to create for what purpose? And you know what? Don't be afraid to overblow the heat a little bit, and you can back it off. I would rather you do that and sort of get too brown too quickly and then back off the heat to finish the cooking, rather than broil on too low of a heat finish the cooking process and then realize, oh, it didn't get brown enough. I didn't get my result that I wanted. I've got soggy, flabby Rockefeller. That's not what you want, right? You want a little crunch. So then your only option is to overcook to get color. So don't do that. So I would recommend sort of starting with that high heat in a learning process, really paying attention, as I know you do, to what you're doing, and sort of learn that fluency of looking at your final outcome and then reverse engineering. Hope that helps. Hey, Lorraine, very basic question. What is the white fat that comes out of salmon when cooked, and how do I prevent it or make it look better? Okay, well, that white fat is actually protein the vast majority of the time. Yes, there is some fat that it renders out, but that is albumin protein that is coming out there, and it coagulates. And, it doesn't look great. However, it is exuded out of the fish, really, when that fish is exposed to very high temperatures. It is forced out of the cells and it's forced out of the fillet, at which point it coagulates on the top. So my suggestion to you is to, pre-salt your fish, season it with salt, and let it sit for about 20 minutes. It strengthens the proteins. It strengthens the cells. It helps keep them bound together inside the fish. The other thing that it does, the other thing I would recommend is reduce your heat. Lower, slower heat results in a less violent cooking process, because when we cook, we take these long cellular walls and the heat constricts them like that. That's what cooking is. That's what coagulation is. They coagulate. So anything that was between gets pushed out, right? So if you're cooking on low, slow heat, you're coagulating kind of more like this. You're not pushing out as much. So there's less to coagulate. So there you go. It's actually easier to cook that way. It's less stressful. You get better yield out of it, and you get a better look. So there you go. And it tastes better. Cheers. Thank you. All right, from Suzanne. Hi, friend. What's your favorite mussel dish to use for Feast of the Seven Fishes? Our family celebrates every Christmas Eve. Fabulous tradition. Hey, happy holidays to you as well. Thanks for joining. My favorite mussel dish. I've got one. It's in the Joy of Seafood, the book. Again, Christmas presents. Yes, sustain the sustainers, please. I did a dish. It's a little complicated, but it's a dish in my first restaurant cafe, Saint X. There's Mussels Saint X, named after the Saint-Exupéry, the Parisian author. And it was a batuta. It was raw garlic, raw shallots, oil, toasted coriander and fennel seed, and smoked paprika, all pureed down into a paste. I started in a very hot cast steel pan, and I would add that paste, that oily paste, right to the pan, and cook it so it sizzled and almost jumped out of the pan, and it gets all the flavors, and the spices toast, and the garlic, the onion loses its rawness. And as soon as that kind of flavor shifts, that aroma shifts in that pan, then you throw the mussels in, right on top of this aromatic mixture. I toss them just once or twice and let them sit. And as soon as the mussels begin to open up in this basically dry pan, soon as they begin to crack open, hit it with white wine, cover the whole thing, or season it with salt, cover the whole thing with a lid or another pan. Let those mussels simmer out. All that juice, that white wine, and that aromatic base all simmers together and just gets so yummy, tasty. Woo! Yeah. Take the top off, throw in a tablespoon or two of butter, and then finish it. I did with a very thinly sliced Spanish chorizo, like a dry, hard-cured chorizo. Just a few slices in there. Man, Mussels Saint X, my invention, I think. I've never seen anything like that anywhere else, but no one has ever done anything new in food in the last 10,000 years, right? We're all just repeating someone else's recipe, whether we know it or not. But I will just claim that I think that one's pretty unique. That one's absolutely delicious. A little involved, so a very much more straightforward one that I really like. Hey, throw in some big cloves of garlic and some butter, and just let it simmer slow and low until the garlic kind of gets caramelized, roasty, toasty. Yum, yum, yum. Throw in your mussels. Red wine, like a nice fruity one, like a Beaujolais. Your Beaujolais Nouveau that you're drinking with your dinner when you're cooking, great. That's the one to use. And a sprig of rosemary. Simmer it down, throw in your butter to finish, toss it up. There you go. Red wine, rosemary, roasted garlic, mussels. Awesome. Okay, 2 more questions and we are good to go. We're right on time here. Hey, Raina, again, this is awesome advice. Thank you. Your question is about the banana leaves. Great. I'm glad that you answered well. Merry Christmas. I hope you have a safe and COVID-safe holiday. Hey, Raina, thank you so much. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you joining. You're wonderful. And from Nancy, hello, friend. Very informative. Can't wait to try some of the recipes. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you and your family. Well, what a nice way to go out. Thank you all so very much to my colleagues at Rouxbe, to all of you. As those of you who joined me before, you know I like to say that cooking and feeding people is an act of love. The world needs more of that, so thank you to you for all you're doing to feed others, to tell them you love them. I love you. I appreciate you. Bon appetit. Come back and see us next year. We'll have a whole new roster of these classes. We'd love to have your input on what you might like to see, so write to me at barton@rouxbe.com. Follow me on Instagram. Please check out my books. I've got 8 of them out there in the world. American Seafood and the Joy of Seafood are companion pieces. This is the owner's manual of seafood. This is the user's guide of seafood. Great gifts. Great little kitchen references. And yeah, as I said, I appreciate you. Bon appetit. Happy holidays to you. We'll see you in the new year. Take care.